Everyone, welcome to the Adventure Mystery Book Club. I'm Bill Mallory, branch manager of the La Jolla Library. I'm so glad that you could join me today for the start of a brand new book that will be beginning today, and that is Whose Body by Dorothy Sayers, the first of the Lord Peter Wimsey books, of which there are, as my research has told me, 11 that were written by Dorothy Sayers herself. And there were several others, 4 or 5, that were written by other people that would come later on. And as I had mentioned in our reading last time, I have not read this book, and so it will be a great way to discover the author and the story and the character, just as you are discovering, unless, of course, you are a big Dorothy Sayers fan. And if that is the case, then I hope I do her credit, and hopefully we'll have a good reading. Um, and likewise, I've not only have I not read any Dorothy Sayers, I've not read any of the Peter Wimsey books, and really, from what I have sort of gleaned, the character is a little bit different in this first outing than he would later become in subsequent novels. So we'll get a beginning of it, and as is often the case, writers will sometimes take a book or two in order to get really into the character and really sort of fine tune what they really want to talk about. So that seems to be the case here. We'll be seeing the early version of Lord Peter Wimsey, and keep checking in with our the Adventure and Mystery Facebook page, and I'll be continuing to do. We'll do our readings on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and we'll be doing. I'll be doing little background things and little sort of side things that relate to the story on Tuesdays and Thursdays, just little posts, and so I'll be looking around to see what we can do on these other days. So that's really about it. I mean, I claim no expertise, so I really can't. I'm not really going to talk about the history of the whole thing too much. I mean, I can tell you that Dorothy Sayers was well known for her mystery novels, the detective novels, and they would poke a little fun at the British class system and other things. And she was also known for her translations. She did several translations into English of famous works, Dante's Inferno and many others. And she was also known for her religious writings, and so she had a wide range of interests, and so we will today check out her the first of the Lord Peter Wimsey books. I will tell you that one thing that I read that I thought was very interesting is that she said that at the time she wrote this, she did not have any money at all. She was very poor at the time and was living in an unfurnished single room. And she said that she really liked writing the Lord Peter Wimsey books during this time because it gave her a chance to imagine this life and living in this very high society and with all these accoutrements and with everything that was kind of stuff that she could not afford, and so she said it was wonderful to be able to spend Peter's money and live this sort of fantasy life when she herself was at the time had nothing and had very little to her name. So, if you are ready, I'm ready. We have our Whose Body by Dorothy L. Sayers, Chapter 1. "Oh, damn," said Lord Peter Wimsey at Piccadilly Circus. "Hi, driver." The taximan, irritated at receiving this appeal while negotiating the intricacies of turning into Lower Regent Street across the route of a 19 bus and a 38B and a bicycle, bent an unwilling ear. "I've left the catalogue behind," said Lord Peter, deprecatingly. "Uncommonly careless of me. Do you mind putting back to where we came from?" "To the Seville Club, sir." No, 110 Piccadilly, just beyond, thank you. Thought you was in a hurry, said the man, overcome with a sense of injury. I'm afraid it's an awkward place to turn in, said Lord Peter, answering the thought rather than the words. His long, amiable face looked as if it had generated spontaneously from his top hat, as white maggots breed from gorgonzola. The taxi, under the severe eye of a policeman, revolved by slow jerks, with a noise like the grinding of teeth. The block of new, perfect, and expensive flats in which Lord Peter dwelt upon the second floor stood directly opposite the Green Park, in a spot for many years occupied by the skeleton of a frustrate commercial enterprise. As Lord Peter let himself in, he heard his man's voice in the library, uplifted in that throttled stridency peculiar to well-trained persons using the telephone. I believe that's his lordship just coming in again. If your grace would kindly hold the line a moment. What is it, Bunter? Her grace has just called up from Denver, my lord. I was just saying your lordship had gone to the sale when I heard your lordship's latchkey. Thanks, said Lord Peter. And you might find me my catalog, would you? I think I must have left it in my bedroom, or on the desk. He sat down to the telephone with an air of leisurely courtesy, as though it were an acquaintance dropped in for a chat. Hello, Mother. That you? Oh, there you are, dear, replied the voice of the Dowager Duchess. I was afraid I just missed you. Well, you had, as a matter of fact. I just started off to Brockleberry's sale to pick up a book or two, but I had to come back for the catalog. What's up? Such a quaint thing, said the Duchess. I thought I'd tell you. You know little Mr. Thipps. Thipps? Said Lord Peter. Thipps. Oh, yes, the little architect man who is doing the church roof. Yes. What about him? Mrs. Throgmorton's just been in quite a state of mind. I'm sorry, Mother, I can't hear you. Mrs. Who? Throgmorton, the vicar's wife. Oh, Throgmorton, yes. Mrs. Thipps, Mr. Thipps rang them this morning. It was his day to come down, you know. Yes. He rang them up to say he couldn't. He was so upset, poor little man. He found a dead body in his bath. Sorry, Mother, I can't hear. Found what? Where? A dead body, dear. In his bath. What? No, we haven't finished. Please, don't cut us off. Hello? Is that you? Mother? Hello? Mother? Oh, yes. Sorry. The girl was trying to cut us off. What sort of body? A dead man, dear, with nothing on but a pair of pince-nez. Mrs. Throgmorton positively blushed when she was telling me. I'm afraid people do get a little narrow-minded in country vicarages. Well, it sounds a bit unusual. Was it anybody he knew? No, dear, I don't think so, but of course he couldn't give her many details. He said that he sounded quite distracted. He's such a respectable little man, and having the police in the house and so on really worried him. Poor little Thipps. Uncommonly awkward for him. Let's see, he lives in Battersea, doesn't he? Yes, dear, 59 Queen Caroline Mansions. Opposite the park, that big block just around the corner from the hospital. I thought perhaps you'd like to run round and see him and ask if there's anything we can do. I always thought him a nice little man. Oh, quite, said Lord Peter, grinning at the telephone. The Duchess was always of the greatest assistance to his hobby of criminal investigation, though she never alluded to it and maintained a polite fiction of its non-existence. What time did it happen, Mother? I think he found it early this morning, but of course he didn't think of telling the Throgmortons just at first. She came up to me just before lunch. So tiresome, I had to ask her to stay. Fortunately, I was alone. I don't mind being bored myself, but I hate having my guests bored. Poor old mother. Well, thanks awfully for telling me. I think I'll send Bunter to the sale and toddle round to Battersea now and try and console the poor little beast. So long. Goodbye, dear. Bunter! Yes, my lord. Her Grace tells me that a respectable Battersea architect has discovered a dead man in his bath. Indeed, my lord, that's very gratifying. Very, Bunter. Your choice of words is unerring. I wish Eton and Balliol had done as much for me. Have you found the catalogue? Here it is, my lord. Thanks. I'm going to Battersea at once. I want you to attend the sale for me. Don't lose time. I don't want to miss the Folio Dante. There is at this point a footnote which reads, This is the first Florence edition, 1481, by Niccolo de Lorenzo. Lord Peter's collection of printed Dantes is worth inspection. It includes, besides the famous Aldine 8-volume of 1502, the Naples Folio of 1477, et Edition Rastissima, according to Colomb. This copy has no history, and Mr. Parker's private belief is that its present owner conveyed it away by stealth from somewhere or other. Lord Peter's own account is that he picked it up in a little place in the hills when making a walking tour through Italy. Don't lose time. I don't want to miss the Folio Dante, nor the De Varenne. Here you are. See, Golden Legend, Winkin de Word, 1493. Got that? And I say, make a special effort for the Caxton Folio of the Four Sons of Aemon. It's the 1489 folio and unique. Look, I've marked the lots I want and put my outside offer against each. Do your best for me. I shall be back to dinner. Very good, my lord. Take my cab and tell him to hurry. He may for you. He doesn't like me very much. Can I, said Lord Peter, looking at himself in the 18th century mirror over the mantelpiece, can I have the heart to fluster the flustered thips further? That's very difficult to say quickly. By appearing in a top hat and frock coat. I think not. 10 to 1, he will overlook my trousers and mistake me for the undertaker. A grey suit, I fancy, neat but not gaudy, with a hat to tone, suits my other self better. Exit the amateur of first editions, a new motive introduced by solo bassoon. Enter Sherlock Holmes, disguised as a walking gentleman. There goes Bunter, invaluable fellow, never offers to do his job when you've told him to do something else. Hope he doesn't miss the Four Sons of Aemon. Still, there is another copy of that in the Vatican. And again, here is another footnote, which reads, Lord Peter's wits were wool-gathering. The book is in the possession of Earl Spencer. The Brocklebury copy is incomplete, the last 5 signatures being altogether missing, but it is unique in possessing the colophon. It might become available. You never know. If the Church of Rome went to pot or Switzerland invaded Italy, whereas a strange corpse doesn't turn up in a suburban bathroom more than once in a lifetime at least. I should think not. At any rate, the number of times it's happened with a pince nez might be counted on the fingers of one hand, I imagine. Dear me, it's a dreadful mistake to ride 2 hobbies at once. He had drifted across the passage into his bedroom and was changing with a rapidity one might not have expected from a man of his mannerisms. He selected a dark green tie to match his socks and tied it accurately, without hesitation or the slightest compression of his lips, substituted a pair of brown shoes for his black ones, slipped a monocle into a breast pocket, and took up a beautiful Malacca walking stick with a heavy silver knob. "That's all, I think," he murmured to himself. "Stay, I may as well have you. You may come in useful. One never knows." He added a flat silver matchbox to his equipment, glanced at his watch, and seeing that it was already 2:45, ran briskly downstairs and, hailing a taxi, was carried to Battersea Park. Mr. Alfred Phipps was a small, nervous man whose flaxen hair was beginning to abandon the unequal struggle with destiny. One might say that his only really marked feature was a large bruise over the left eyebrow, which gave him a faintly dissipated air incongruous with the rest of his appearance. Almost in the same breath with his first meeting, he made a self-conscious apology for it, murmuring something about having run against the dining-room door in the dark. He was touched almost to tears by Lord Peter's thoughtfulness and condescension in calling. "I'm sure it's most kind of your lordship," he repeated for the dozenth time, rapidly blinking his weak little eyelids. "I appreciate it very deeply indeed, and so would Mother, only she's so deaf. I don't like to trouble you with making her understand. It's been very hard all day," he added. "With the policeman in the house and all this commotion, it's what Mother and me have never been used to, always living very retired, and it's most distressing to a man of regular habits, my lord, and really, I'm almost thankful Mother doesn't understand, for I'm sure it would worry her terribly if she was to know about it. She was upset at first, but she's made up some idea of her own about it now, and I'm sure it's all for the best." The old lady, who was sitting knitting by the fire, nodded grimly in response to a look from her son. "I always said you ought to complain about that bath, Alfred," she said suddenly in a high, piping voice peculiar to the deaf. "And it's to be hoped that the landlord'll see about it now. Not but what I think you might have managed without having the police in, but there. You always were one to make a fuss about a little thing, from chicken pox up." "There now," said Mr. Phipps apologetically, "you see how it is. Not but what it's just as well she's settled on that. Because she understands we've locked up the bathroom, and don't try to go in there. But it's been a terrible shock to me, sir, my lord, should I say, but there, my nerves are all to pieces. Such a thing has never happened to me in all my born days. Such a state I was in this morning. I didn't know if I was on my head or my heels. I really didn't. And my heart was not being too strong. I hardly knew how to get out of that horrid room and telephone for the police. It's affected me, sir. It's affected me. It really has. I couldn't touch a bit of breakfast, nor lunch neither, and what with telephoning and putting off clients and interviewing people all morning, I've hardly known what to do with myself." "I'm sure it must have been uncommonly distressing," said Lord Peter sympathetically, "especially coming like that before breakfast. Hate anything tiresome happening before breakfast. Takes a man at such a confounded disadvantage, what?" That's just it, said Mr. Phipps eagerly. "When I saw that dreadful thing lying there in my bath, Mother naked too, except for a pair of eyeglasses, I assure you, my lord, it regularly turned my stomach, if you'll excuse the expression. I'm not very strong, sir, and I get to that sinking feeling sometimes in the morning, and what with the one thing and another, I add to send the girl for a stiff brandy, or I don't know what might have happened. I felt so queer. though I'm anything but partial to spirits as a rule. Still, I make it a rule never to be without brandy in the house, in case of emergency, you know." "Very wise of you," said Lord Peter cheerfully. "You're a very far-seeing man, Mr. Phipps. Wonderful what a little nip will do in a case of need, and the less you're used to it, the more good it does you. Hope your girl is a sensible young woman, what? Nuisance to have women fainting and shrieking all over the place." "Oh, Gladys is a good girl," said Mr. Phipps. "Very reasonable indeed. She was shocked, of course. That's very understandable. I was shocked myself, and it wouldn't be proper in a young woman not to be shocked under the circumstances. But she is really a helpful, energetic girl in a crisis, if you understand me. I consider myself very fortunate these days to have not a good, decent girl to do for me and mother, even though she is a bit careless and forgetful about little things. But that's only natural. She was very sorry indeed about having left the bathroom window open. She really was. And though I was angry at first, seeing what's come of it, it wasn't anything to speak of, not in the ordinary way, as you might say. Girls will forget things, you know, my lord, and really she was so distressed. I didn't like to say too much to her. All I said was, "It might have been burglars," I said. "Remember that. Next time you leave a window open all night. This time it was a dead man," I said. "And that's unpleasant enough, but next time it might be burglars," I said. "And all of us murdered in our beds." But the police inspector, Inspector Sugg, they called him, from the yard, he was very sharp with her, poor girl, quite frightened her, and made her think he suspected her of something. Though what good a body could be to her, poor girl, I can't imagine, and so I told the inspector. He was quite rude to me, my lord. I may say I didn't like his manner at all. "If you've got anything definite to accuse Gladys or me of, Inspector," I said to him, "bring it forward. That's what you have to do," I said. "But I've yet to learn that you're paid to be rude to a gentleman in his own house." "House? Really?" said Mr. Phipps, growing quite pink on the top of his head. "He regularly roused me, my lord, and I'm a mild man as a rule." "Sugg all over," said Lord Peter. "I know him. When he doesn't know what else to say, he's rude. Stands to reason you and the girl wouldn't go collecting bodies. Who'd want to saddle himself with a body? Difficulties usually to get rid of 'em. Have you got rid of this one yet, by the way?" "It's still in the bathroom," said Mr. Phipps. "Inspector Sugg said nothing said nothing was to be touched till his men came in to move it. I'm expecting them at any time. If it would interest your lordship to have a look at it." "Oh, thanks awfully," said Lord Peter. I'd like to very much, if I'm not putting you out." "Not at all," said Mr. Phipps. His manner, as he led the way along the passage, convinced Lord Peter of two things. First, that gruesome as his exhibit was, he rejoiced in the importance it reflected upon himself and his flat. And secondly, that Inspector Sugg had forbidden him to exhibit it to anyone. The latter supposition was confirmed by the action of Mr. Phipps, who stopped to fetch the door key from his bedroom, saying that the police had the other, but that he made it a rule to have 2 keys to every door, in case of accident. The bathroom was in no way remarkable. It was long and narrow, the window being exactly over the head of the bath. The panes were of frosted glass, the frame wide enough to admit a man's body. Lord Peter stepped rapidly across it, opened it, and looked out. The flat was on the top one of the building, and situated about the middle of the block. The bathroom window looked out upon the backyards of the flats, which were occupied by various small outbuildings, coal holes, garages, and the like. Beyond these were the black gardens of a parallel line of houses. On the right rose the extensive edifice of St. Luke's Hospital, Battersea, with its grounds, and connected with it by a covered way the residence of a famous surgeon, Sir Julian Freke, who directed the surgical side of the great new hospital, and was, in addition, known in Harley Street as a distinguished neurologist with a highly individual point of view. This information was poured into Lord Peter's ear at considerable length by Mr. Phipps, who seemed to feel that the neighborhood of anybody so distinguished shed a kind of halo of glory over Queen Caroline Mansions. "We had him round here this morning," he said, "about this horrid business. Inspector Sugg thought one of the young medical gentlemen at the hospital might have brought the corpse round for a joke, as you might say. They always have bodies in the dissecting room. So Inspector Sugg went round to see Sir Julian this morning to ask if there was a body missing. He was very kind, was Sir Julian, very kind indeed, though he was at work when they got there, in the dissecting room. He looked up the books to see that all the bodies were accounted for, and then, very obligingly, came round here to look at this." He indicated the bath. "And said he was afraid he couldn't help us. There was no corpse missing from the hospital, and this one didn't answer to the description of any they'd had." "Nor to the description of any of the patients, I hope," suggested Lord Peter casually. At this grisly hint, Mr. Phipps turned pale. "I didn't hear Inspector Sugg inquire," he said with some agitation. "What a very horrid thing that would be! God bless my soul, my lord, I never thought of it." "Well, if they had missed a patient, they'd probably have discovered it by now," said Lord Peter. "Let's have a look at this one." He screwed his monocle into his eye, adding, "I see you're troubled here with the soot blowing in. Beastly nuisance, isn't it? I get it, too. Spoils all my books, you know. Here, don't you trouble if you don't care about looking at it." He took from Mr. Phipps' hesitating hand the sheet which had been flung over the bath and turned it back. The body, which lay in the bath, was that of a tall, stout man of about 50. The hair, which was thick and black and naturally curly, had been cut and parted by a master hand, and exuded a faint violet perfume, perfectly recognizable in the close air of the bathroom. The features were thick, fleshy, and strongly marked, with prominent dark eyes, and a long nose curving down to a heavy chin. The clean-shaven lips were full and sensual, and the dropped jaw showed teeth stained with tobacco. On the dead face, a handsome pair of gold pince-nez mocked death with grotesque elegance. The fine gold chain curved over the naked breast. The legs lay stiffly stretched out side by side. The arms reposed close to the body. The fingers were flexed naturally. Lord Peter lifted one arm and looked at the hand with a little frown. "Bit of a dandy, your visitor, what?" he murmured. "Parma violent and manicure." He bent again, slipping his hand under beneath the head. The absurd eyeglasses slipped off, clattering into the bath, and the noise put the last touch to Mr. Phipps' growing nervousness. "If you'll excuse me," he murmured, "it makes me feel quite faint, it really does." He slipped outside, and he had no sooner done so than Lord Peter, lifting the body quickly and cautiously, turned it over and inspected it with the head on one side, bringing his monocle into play with the air of the late Joseph Chamberlain approving a rare orchid. He then laid the head over his arm, and, bringing out the silver matchbox from his pocket, slipped it into the open mouth. Then, making the noise usually written "tut-tut," He laid the body down, picked up the mysterious pince-nez, looked at it, put it on his nose, and looked through it and made the same noise again, readjusted the pince-nez upon the nose of the corpse, so as to leave no traces of interference for the irritation of Inspector Sugg, rearranged the body, returned to the window, and, leaning out, reached upwards and sideways with his walking stick, which he had somewhat incongruously brought along with him. Nothing appeared to come of these investigations. He withdrew his head, closed the window, and rejoined Mr. Thipps in the passage. Mr. Thipps, touched by this sympathetic interest in the younger son of the Duke, took the liberty, on their return to the sitting-room, of offering him a cup of tea. Lord Peter, who had strolled over to the window and was admiring the outlook on Battersea Park, was about to accept when an ambulance came into view at the end of Prince of Wales Road. Its appearance reminded Lord Peter of an important engagement with a hurried, "By Jove!" He took his leave of Mr. Thipps. "My mother sent kind regards, and all that," he said, shaking hands fervently. "Hopes you'll soon be down in Denver again. Goodbye, Mrs. Thipps," he bawled kindly into the ear of the old lady. "Oh, no, my dear, please, don't trouble to come down." He was none too soon. As he stepped out of the door and turned toward the station, the ambulance drew up from the other direction, and Inspector Sugg emerged from it with 2 constables. The inspector spoke to the officer on duty at the mansions, and turned a suspicious gaze on Lord Peter's retreating back. "Dear old Sugg," said the nobleman fondly. "Dear, dear old bird. How he does hate me, to be sure." Well, I tell you what, that's the end of chapter 1. We're only about 30 minutes into this, so why don't we go on and we'll just keep on going through chapter 2. "Excellent, Bunter," said Lord Peter, sinking with a sigh into a luxurious armchair. "I couldn't have done better myself. The thought of the Dante makes my mouth water. And the 4 sons of Ammon, and you've saved me £60. That's glorious. What shall we spend it on, Bunter? Think of it, all ours to do as we like with, for as Harold Skimpole so rightly observes, £60 saved is £60 gained. And I'd reckoned on spending it all. It's your saving, Bunter, and properly speaking, your £60. What do we want? Anything in your department? Would you like anything altered in the flat?" "Well, my lord, as your lordship is so good—" The manservant paused, about to pour an old brandy into a liqueur glass. "Well, out with it, my Bunter, you imperturbable old hypocrite. It's no good talking as if you were announcing dinner. You're spilling the brandy." The voice is Jacob's voice, but the hands are the hands of Esau. What does that blessed dark room of yours want now?" "There's a double anastigmat, which a set of supplementary lenses, my lord," said Bunter with a note of almost religious fervor. "If it was a case of forgery now, or footprints, I could enlarge them right up on the plate. Or the wide-angled lens would be useful. It's as though the camera had eyes at the back of its head, my lord. Look, I've got it here." He pulled a catalogue from his pocket and submitted it, quivering, to his employer's gaze. Lord Peter perused the description slowly. The corners of his long mouth lifted into a faint smile. "It's Greek to me," he said, "and £50 seems a ridiculous price for a few bits of glass. I suppose, Bunter, you'd say £750 was a bit out of the way for a dirty old book in a dead language, wouldn't you?" "It wouldn't be my place to say so, my lord." No, Bunter, I pay you £200 a year to keep your thoughts to yourself. Tell me, Bunter, in these democratic days, don't you think that's unfair? No, my lord, you don't. Do you mind telling me frankly why you don't think why you don't think it unfair? Frankly, my lord, your lordship is paid a nobleman's income to take Lady Worthington in to dinner and refrain from exercising your lordship's undoubted powers of repartee. Lord Peter considered this. That's your idea, is it, Bunter? Noblesse oblige? For a consideration? I dare say you're right. Then you're better off than I am, because I have to behave myself to Lady Worthington, and if I hadn't a penny. Bunter, if I sacked you here and now, would you tell me what you think of me? No, my lord. You'd have a perfect right to, my Bunter. And if I sacked you on top of drinking the kind of coffee you make, I'd deserve everything you could say of me. You're a demon for coffee, Bunter. I don't want to know how you do it, because I believe it to be witchcraft, and I don't want to burn eternally. You can buy your cross-eyed lens. Thank you, my lord. Have you finished in the dining room? Not quite, my lord. Well, come back when you have. I have many things to tell you. Hello, who's that? The doorbell had rung sharply. Unless it's anybody interesting, I'm not home. Very good, my lord. Lord Peter's library was one of the most delightful bachelor rooms in London. Its scheme was black and primrose. Its walls were lined with rare editions, and its chairs and Chesterfield sofa suggested the embraces of the Horace. In one corner stood a black baby grand. A wood fire leaped on a side of on a wide old-fashioned hearth, and Sevres vases and the chimney piece were filled with ruddy and gold chrysanthemums. To the eyes of the young man who was ushered in from the raw November fog, it seemed not only rare and unattainable, but friendly and familiar, like a colorful and gilded paradise in a medieval painting. Mr. Parker, my lord. Lord Peter jumped up with genuine eagerness. My dear man, I'm delighted to see you. What a beastly foggy night, isn't it? Bunter, some more of that admirable coffee and another glass and the cigars. Parker, I hope you're full of crime. Nothing less than arson or murder will do for us tonight. On such a night as this, Bunter and I were just sitting down to carouse. I've got a Dante and a Caxton folio that is practically unique at Sir Ralph Brockleberry's sale. Bunter, who did the bargaining, is going to have a lens, which does all kinds of wonderful things with its eyes shut, and we both have got the body in the bath. We both have got the body in the bath. For in spite of all temptations to go in for cheap sensations, we insist upon the body in the bath. Nothing less will do for us, Parker. It's mine at present, but we're going shares in it. Property of the firm. Won't you join us? You really must put something in the jackpot. Perhaps you have a body? Oh, you do have a body. Everybody welcome. Gin a body, meet a body, hauled before the beak. Gin a body, jolly well knows who murdered a body, that the old sug is on the wrong tack. Need a body, speak? Not a bit of it. He tips a glassy wink to yours truly, and yours truly reads the truth. Ah, said Parker. I knew you'd been round to Queen Caroline Mansions. So have I, and met Sugg, and he told me he'd seen you. He was cross, too. Unwarrantable interference, he called it. I knew he would, said Lord Peter. I love taking a rise out of dear old Sugg. He's always so rude. I see by the star that he has excelled himself by taking the girl, Gladys what's her name, into custody. Sug of the evening, beautiful Sug. But what were you doing there? To tell the truth, said Parker, I went round to see if the Semitic-looking stranger in Mr. Thipp's bath was any extraordinary chance Sir Reuben Levy, but he isn't. Sir Reuben Levy? Wait a minute. I saw something about that. I know. A headline. Mysterious disappearance of famous financier. What's it all about? I didn't read it carefully. Excuse me. Well, it's a bit odd, though I dare say it's nothing really. Old chap may have cleared for some reason, best known to himself. It only happened this morning, and nobody would have thought anything about it, only it happened to be the day on which he had arranged to attempt a most important financial meeting and do some deal involving millions. I haven't got all the details, but I know he's got enemies who'd just as soon the deal didn't come off. So when I got wind of this fellow in the bath, I buzzed round to have a look at him. It didn't seem likely, of course. Far unlikelier things do happen in our profession. The funny thing is, old Sugg had got bitten with the idea that it is him, and is wildly telegraphing to Lady Levy to come and identify him. But as a matter of fact, the man in the bath is no more Sir Reuben Levy than Adolph Beck, poor devil, was John Smith. Oddly enough, though, he would be really extraordinarily like Sir Reuben if he had a beard, as Lady Levy is abroad with the family. Somebody may say it's him, and Sugg will build up a lovely theory like the Tower of Babel and destined so to perish. Sugg's a beautiful braying ass, said Lord Peter. He's like a detective in a novel. Well, I don't know anything about Levy, but I've seen the body, and I should say the idea was preposterous upon the face of it. What do you think of the brandy? Unbelievable whimsy. Sort of thing makes one believe in heaven. But I want your yarn. Do you mind if Bunter hears it too? Invaluable man, Bunter. Amazing fellow with a camera. The odd thing is, he's always on the spot. When I want my bath or my boots, I don't know when he develops things. I believe he does them in his sleep. Bunter! Yes, my lord. Stop fiddling about in there and get yourself the proper things to drink and join the merry throng. Certainly, my lord. Mr. Parker has a new trick, the vanishing financier. Absolutely no deception. Hey, presto, pass, and where is he? Will some gentleman from the audience kindly step upon the platform and inspect the cabinet? Thank you, sir. The quickness of the hand deceives the eye. I'm afraid mine isn't much of a story, said Parker. It's just one of those simple things that offer no handle. Sir Reuben Levy dined last night with 3 friends at the Ritz. After dinner, the friends went to the theater. He refused to go with them on account of an appointment. I haven't yet been able to trace the appointment, but anyhow, he returned home to his house at 9A Park Lane at 12 o'clock. Who saw him? The cook, who had just gone to bed, saw him on the doorstep and heard him let himself in. He walked upstairs, leaving his greatcoat in the hall, on the great hall peg, and his umbrella in the stand. You remember how it rained last night. He undressed and went to bed. Next morning, he wasn't there. That's all, said Parker abruptly with a wave of the hand. It isn't all. It isn't all. Daddy, go on. That's not half a story, pleaded Lord Peter. But it is all. When his man came to call him, he wasn't there. The bed had been slept in, his pajamas and all his clothes were there. The only odd thing being that they were thrown rather untidily on the ottoman at the foot of the bed, instead of being neatly folded on a chair, as is Sir Reuben's custom, looking as though he had been rather agitated or unwell. No clean clothes were missing, no suit, no boots, nothing. The boots he had worn were in the dressing room, as usual. He had washed and cleaned his teeth and done all the usual things. The housemaid was down cleaning the hall at 6:30, and can swear that nobody came in or out after that. So one is forced to suppose that a respectable middle-aged Hebrew financier either went mad between 12 and 6 a.m. and walked quietly out of the house in his birthday suit on a November night, or else was spirited away like the lady of in the Inglesby legends, body and bones leaving only a heap of crumpled clothes behind him. Was the front door bolted? That's the sort of question you would ask, straight off. It took me an hour to think of it. No, contrary to custom, there was only the Yale lock on the door. On the other hand, some of the maids had been given leave to go to the theater, and Sir Reuben may quite conceivably have left the door open under the impression that they might not come in. Such a thing has happened before. And that's really all, except for one trifling circumstance. "Oh, I love trifling circumstances," said Lord Peter with childish delight. "So many men have been hanged by trifling circumstances. What is it?" Sir Reuben and Lady Levy, who are a most devoted couple, always share the same room. Lady Levy, as I said before, is in Mentone at the moment for her health. In her absence, Sir Reuben sleeps in the double bed as usual, and invariably on his own side, the outside of the bed. Last night he put the two pillows together and slept in the middle, or, if anything, rather closer to the wall than otherwise. The housemaid, who is a most intelligent girl, noticed this when she went up to make the bed, and with really admirable detective instinct, refused to touch the bed or let anybody else touch it, though it wasn't till later that they actually sent for the police. Was nobody in the house but Sir Reuben and his servants? No. Lady Levy was away with her daughter and her maid. The valet, cook, parlour-maid, housemaid, and kitchen-maid were the only people in the house, and naturally wasted an hour or two squawking and gossiping. I got there about 10. What have you been doing since? Trying to get on the track of Sir Reuben's appointment last night, since, with the exception of the cook, his appointer was the last person who saw him before his disappearance. There may be some quite simple explanation, though I'm dashed if I can think of one for the moment. Hang it all, a man doesn't come in and go to bed and walk away again mid-noddings on in the middle of the night. He may have been disguised. I thought of that. In fact, it seems the only possible explanation, but it's deuced odd, Whimsy. An important city man on the eve of an important transaction, without a word of warning to anybody, slips off in the middle of the night, disguised down to his skin, leaving behind his watch, purse, checkbook, and, most mysterious and important of all, his spectacles, without which he can't see a step, as he is extremely short-sighted. That is important, interrupted Whimsy. You are sure he didn't take a second pair? His man vouches for it that he had only 2 pairs, one of which was found on his dressing table and the other in the drawer where it is always kept. Lord Peter whistled. You've got me there, Parker. Even if he'd gone out to commit suicide, he'd have taken those. So you'd think, or the suicide would have happened the first time he started to cross the road. However, I didn't overlook the possibility. I've got particulars of all today's street accidents, and I can lay my hand on my heart and say that none of them is Sir Reuben. Besides, He took his latchkey with him, which looks as though he'd meant to come back. Have you seen the men he dined with? I found 2 of them at the club. They said that he seemed in the best of health and spirits, spoke of looking forward to joining Lady Levy later on, perhaps at Christmas, and referred with great satisfaction to this morning's business transaction, in which one of them, a man called Anderson of Wyndham's, was himself concerned. Then, up till about 9 o'clock anyhow, he had no apparent intention of or expectation of disappearing. None, unless he was a most consummate actor. Whatever happened to change his mind must have happened either at the mysterious appointment which he kept after dinner, or while he was in bed between midnight and 5:30 a.m. Well, Bunter, said Lord Peter, what do you make of it? Not in my department, my lord, except that it is odd that a gentleman who was too flurried or unwell to fold his clothes as usual should remember to clean his teeth and put his boots out. Those are 2 things that quite frequently get overlooked, my lord. If you mean anything personal, Bunter, said Lord Peter, I can only say that I think the speech is an unworthy one. It's a sweet little problem, Parker mine. Look here, I don't want to butt in, but I should dearly love to see the bedroom tomorrow. 'Tis not that I mistrust thee, dear, but I should uncommonly like to see it. Say me not nay. Take another drop of brandy, and a viller, but say not nay. Of course you can come and see it. You'll probably find lots of things I've overlooked, said the other, equably, accepting the proffered hospitality. Parker, acushla, you're the honor to Scotland Yard. I look at you, and Sugg appears a myth, a fable, an idiot boy spawned in a moonlight hour by some fantastic poet's brain. Sugg is too perfect to be possible. What does he make of the body, by the way? Sugg says, replied Parker with precision, that the body died from a blow to the back of the neck. The doctor told him that. He says it's been dead for a day or 2. The doctor told him that, too. He says it's the body of a well-to-do Hebrew of about 50. Anybody could have told him that. He says it's ridiculous to suppose it came in through the window without anybody knowing anything about it. He says it probably walked in through the front door and was murdered by the household. He's arrested the girl because she's short and frail-looking and quite unequal to downing a tall, sturdy Semite with a poker. He'd arrest Phipps, only Phipps was away in Manchester all yesterday and the day before and didn't come back till late last night. In fact, he wanted to arrest him till I reminded him that if the body had been a day or 2 dead, little Phipps couldn't have done him in at 10:30 last night. But he'll arrest him tomorrow as an accessory, and the old lady with the knitting, too, I shouldn't wonder. Well, I'm glad the little man has so much of an alibi, said Lord Peter. Though, if you're only gluing your faith to cadaveric lividity, rigidity, and all the other quiddities, you must be prepared to have some skeptical beast of a prosecuting counsel walk slap-bang through the medical evidence. Remember Impey Biggs defending in that Chelsea tea-shop affair? 6 bloomin' medicos contradicting each other in a box, and old Impey elocutin' abnormal cases from Gloucester and Dixon Man till the eyes of the jury reeled in their heads. Are you prepared to swear, Dr. Thingamtight, that the onset of rigor mortis indicates the hour of death without the possibility of error? So far as my experience goes, in the majority of cases, says the doctor, all stiff. Ah, says Biggs, but this is a court of justice, doctor, not a parliamentary election. We can't get on without a minority report. The law, Dr. Thingamtight, respects the rights of the minority alive or dead. Some ass laughs, and old Biggs sticks his chest out and gets impressive. Gentlemen, this is no laughing matter. My client, an upright and honorable gentleman, is being tried for his life. For his life, gentlemen. And it is the business of the prosecution to show his guilt, if they can, without a shadow of a doubt. Now, Dr. Thigumtight, I ask you again, can you solemnly swear, without the least shadow of doubt, probable, possible shadow of doubt, that this unhappy woman met her death neither sooner nor later than Thursday evening? A probable opinion? Gentlemen, we are not Jesuits, we are straightforward Englishmen. You cannot ask a British-born jury to convict any man on the authority of a probable opinion. Hum of applause. Biggs' man was guilty all the same, said Parker. Of course he was, but he was acquitted all the same, and what you've just said is libel. Whimsy walked over to the bookshelf and took down a volume of medical jurisprudence. Rigor mortis can only be stated in a very general way. Many factors determine the result. Cautious brute. On the average, however, stiffening will have begun neck and jaw 5 to 6 hours after death. In all likelihood to have passed off in the bulk of cases by the end of 36 hours. Under certain circumstances, however, it may appear unusually early or be retarded unusually long. Helpful, ain't it, Parker? Brown Sequard states 3.5 minutes after death, in certain cases not until lapse of 16 hours after death, present as long as 21 days thereafter. Lord! Modifying factors: age, muscular state, or febrile diseases, or where temperature of environment is high, and so on, any bloomin' thing. Never mind, you can go run the argument for what it's worth to Sugg. He won't know any better. He tossed the book away. Come back to facts. What did you make of the body? Well, said the detective, not very much. I was puzzled, frankly. I should say he had been a rich man, but self-made, and that his good fortune had come to him fairly recently. Ah, you noticed the calluses on the hands. I thought you wouldn't miss that. Both his feet were badly blistered. He had been wearing tight shoes. Walking all the way in them, too, said Lord Peter, to get such blisters as that. Didn't that strike you as odd in a person evidently well off? Well, I don't know. The blisters were 2 or 3 days old. He might have got stuck in a suburbs one night, perhaps, last train gone and no taxi, and had to walk home. Possibly. There were some little red marks all over his back and one leg. I couldn't quite account for. I saw them. What did you make of them? I will tell you afterwards. Go on. He was a very long-sighted, oddly long-sighted for a man in the prime of his life. The glasses were like a very old man's. By the way, they had a very beautiful and remarkable chain of flat links chased with a pattern. It struck me he might be traced through it. I've just put in an advertisement in the Times about it, said Lord Peter. Go on. He had had the glasses some time, and they had been mended twice. Beautiful, Parker, beautiful. Did you realize the importance of that? Not specially, I'm afraid. Why? Never mind, go on. He was probably a sullen, ill-tempered man. His nails were filed down to the quick, as though he was habitually bit them, and his fingers were bitten as well. He smoked quantities of cigarettes without a holder. He was particular about his personal appearance. Did you examine the room at all? I didn't get a chance. I couldn't find much in the way of footprints. Sugg and company had tramped all over the place, to say nothing of little Phipps and the maid. But I noticed a very indefinite patch just behind the head of the bath, as though something damp might have stood there. You could hardly call it a print. It rained hard all last night, of course. Yes. Did you notice that the soot on the windowsill was vaguely marked? I did, said Whimsy, and I examined it hard with this little fellow, but I could make nothing of it except that something or other had rested on the sill. He drew out his monocle and handed it to Parker. My word, that's a powerful lens. It is, said Whimsy, and jolly useful when you want to make a good squint at something, and look like a bally fool all the time. Only it don't do to wear it permanently. If people see you full face, they say, Dear me, how weak the sight of that eye must be. Still, it's useful. Sugg and I explored the ground at the back of the building, went on Parker. But there wasn't a trace. That's interesting. Did you try the roof? No. We'll go over it tomorrow. The gutter's only a couple of feet from the top of the window. I measured it with my stick. The gentleman's scout, Vadimecum, called it. It's marked off in inches. Uncommonly handy companion at times. There's a sword inside and a compass in the head. I got it made specially. Anything more? Afraid not. Let's hear your version, Whimsy. Well, I think you've got most of the points. There are just one or two little contradictions. For instance, here's a man wears an expensive gold rim pince nez and has had them long enough to be mended twice, yet his teeth are not merely discolored, but badly decayed, and looked as if he'd never cleaned them in his life. There are 4 molars missing on one side and 3 on the other, and one front tooth broken right across. He's a man careful of his personal appearance, as witness his hair and his hands. What do you say to that? Oh, these self-made men of low origin don't think much about teeth, or are terrified of dentists. True, but one of the molars had a broken edge, so rough that it had made a sore place on the tongue. Nothing more painful. Do you mean to tell me a man would put up with that if he could afford to get the tooth filed? Well, people are queer. I've known servants endure agonies rather than step over a dentist's doormat. How did you see that, Whimsy? Had a look inside. Electric torch, said Lord Peter. Handy little gadget, looks like a matchbox. Well, I dare say it's all right, but I just draw your attention to it. Second point, gentleman with hair smelling of Parma violet and manicured hands and all the rest of it never washes the inside of his ears. Full of wax. Nasty. You've got me there, Whimsy. I never noticed it. Still, old habits die hard. Righto, put it down at that. Third point, gentleman with the manicure and the brilliantine and all the rest of it suffers from fleas. By Jove, you're right. Flea bites. It never occurred to me. No doubt about it, old son. The marks were faint and old, but unmistakable. Of course, now you mention it, still, that might happen to anybody. I loosed a whopper in the best hotel in Lincoln the weeks before last. I hope it bit the next occupier. Oh, all these things might happen to anybody separately. Fourth point, gentleman who uses Parma violet for his hair, etc., washes his body in strong carbolic soap. So strong the smell hangs about for 24 hours later. Carbolic to get rid of the fleas. I will say for you, Parker, you've an answer for everything. Fifth point, carefully got up gentleman with manicured through though masticated fingernails has filthy black toenails which look as if they hadn't been cut for years. All a piece of habits as indicated. Yes, I know, but such habits. Now, sixth and last point, the gentleman with the intermittently gentlemanly habits arrived in the middle of a pouring wet night, and apparently through a window, when he had already been 24 hours dead, and lies down quietly in Mr. Thipp's bath, unseasonably dressed in a pair of pince-nez. Not a hair on his head is ruffled. The hair has been cut so recently that there are quite a number of little short hairs stuck on his neck and the sides of the bath. And he has shaved so recently that there is a line of dried soap on his cheek. Whimsy! Wait a minute. And dried soap in his mouth. Bunter got up and appeared suddenly at the detective's elbow, the respectful manservant all over. A little more brandy, sir, he murmured. Whimsy, said Parker. You're making me feel cold all over. He emptied his glass, stared at it as though he were surprised to find it empty, set it down, got up, walked across to the bookcase, turned round, stood with his back against it, and said, Look here, Whimsy. You've been reading detective stories. You're talking nonsense. No, I ain't, said Lord Peter sleepily. Uncommon good incident for a detective story, though. What? Bunter will write one. You shall illustrate it with photographs. Soap in his... Rubbish, said Parker. It was something else, some discoloration. No, said Lord Peter. There were hairs as well, bristly ones. He had a beard. He took his watch from his pocket and drew out a couple of longish, stiff hairs, which he had imprisoned between the inner and outer case. Parker turned them over once or twice in his fingers, looked at them close to the light, examined them with a lens, handed them to the impassible Bunter, and said, Do you mean to tell me, Whimsy, that any man alive would, he laughed harshly, shave off his beard with his mouth open and then go and get killed with a mouth full of hairs? You're mad. I don't tell you so, said Whimsy. You policemen are all alike. Only one idea in your skulls. Blessed if I can make out why you're ever appointed. He was shaved after he was dead. Pretty, ain't it? Uncommonly jolly little job for the barber, what? Here, sit down, man, and don't be an ass, stumping about the room like that. Worse things happen in war. This is only a blinking old shillin' shocker. But I'll tell you what, Parker, we're up against a criminal. The criminal, the real artist and blighter with imagination. Real, artistic, finished stuff. I'm enjoying this, Parker. And that is the end of Chapter 2. We have gone a little bit long. Chapter 2 was longer than Chapter 1, and so here we are. So if you're joining me for this, our first two chapters of Whose Body by Dorothy L. Sayers, thank you so much for joining me. Have a good Thanksgiving. My plan is to do this again on Friday. We may do a pre-recorded one, and then we'll be back on Monday after that. So thank you for joining me. Have a great holiday, and we will see you again next time at 4 p.m. Thank you, everyone. Bye.